that can't happen for a person, so it can't happen at random. Now the mind's going to say, oh wait, maybe, well, the mind might say, well, you're just being a bit tricky there. What you're really saying is that the person disappears, and then liberation is seen. That's a phrase I use, that's a phrase other people use. The person disappears, then liberation is seen. Well, is that a random event or a caused event? The person disappearing? Neither, because it isn't an event. It's the disappearance of something that never existed. And at this point, in this kind of dialogue or conversation, I and other people often reach for the metaphor of the nighttime dream. Because it's not that good a metaphor, but it's probably as good a one as there is. And so we know, all of us in this room know that there can be the totally convincing appearance of time, events happening within time, cause and effect within those events, perhaps if it's a nighttime dream we're talking about, certainly random events happening as well. All of those things, we all experience, probably almost all of us experience this every night, although we may not remember it. This appearance, this jolly convincing appearance of random events which are cause, events unfolding in time, events happening to me, the person, and yet, just in a moment of awakening, but at this point we're talking about a moment of waking up in the morning, it seemed that none of that had any reality. What sense does it make to say that the events in my dream were random, or the events in my dream were caused? The events in my dream happened because of my exceptionally spiritual karma. In my dream, I won the big one, the lotto, the Euro millions in my dream. And it didn't ruin my character like it would for a lesser mortal. Because of my wonderful character, it was just purely lovely all the way. And I was told in my dream by an angel that I'd won the Euro lottery because of my particularly spiritual past lives. And this was my time. Utterly convincing in the dream, utterly convincing. Now, the moment you wake up, it's nonsense. It's complete nonsense. Nothing happened. Why is it complete nonsense? Because nothing happened. We can't start picking it apart and saying, oh well, this part was complete nonsense, because we know you, Richard, and we know that you can't have that wonderful golden karma from your higher spiritual past life, because we know you're a bit of a rogue. We can see that you don't deserve that. But we can't start picking it apart like that, because the whole thing was just an appearance. And so then to start asking these questions in the nighttime view, it becomes very obvious, why it doesn't work, why in a sense we need to shift paradigm. We need to shift out of the whole paradigm of cause and effect and time and consequence. We can see that really easily, I submit, with a nighttime dream. And of course it wasn't a random event that you missed the train to Birmingham, got on the next train, and then met the woman that you fell in love with as a result of that. Of course that wasn't random, neither was it the result of your wonderful karma. Neither was it the grace of the God of love, because nothing happened. To which the dreamer might reply, oh yes, something happened, the dream happened, I had Yes, that's exactly what we were saying about this. This is the dream happening. This is the waking dream happening. And for anyone who's going to, at this point, object as you might well do, well, excuse me, isn't this pretty convincing compared to a nighttime dream? Yes, it is when you've woken up in the morning, but the nighttime dream is just as convincing when we're in it. So the questions that are asked about this, they're very natural questions. Of course, they're questions I would also ask. Is this random? Is it caused? If it's caused, is there anything we can do about it? Does this path work? And so from the position of the person, all of these questions make perfect sense. And in a way, we have to sort of step into a different paradigm, where all of those questions collapse. They don't collapse because they don't make sense. They collapse because they don't apply in the same way that they don't apply to the nighttime dream. In the same way they don't apply, for example, to a film. How much emotional pain did the heroine feel in that film that we saw last night, when the hero was swept out to sea and eaten by a large shark? How much emotional pain on a scale of 0 to 10 did they feel? 5? 8? Were they callous and heartless? Maybe it was only 2. Perhaps their whole love for the hero was they were dissembling, and they were really delighted he got eaten by a shark, because that meant they could go off with his brother. Maybe they actually felt delight rather than pain. Which is it? It's nonsense. We can see that it's nonsense. Why is it nonsense? Because they don't exist. It's a very convincing appearance. A dream is a very convincing appearance. A film, if it's a good film, is a very convincing appearance. This is a very good analogy. This is a very convincing appearance.
Why does it have to be so good?
What?
Why does it have to be so good?
No, it could be rubbish, absolutely.
Why not good? They seem very thoughtful. They seem very real, don't you say?
Dreams, yeah. And sometimes they're horrible.
They seem very real.
Yes.
But why? Why is it so good?
The trouble is, you see, all the why questions, it's the mind coming in wanting explanation. We could probably not just give that an explanation, we could give that many explanations on many different levels. For example, I was going to say the psychologist could give one explanation. Actually, 10 psychologists could give 15 explanations. The shaman will give another explanation. Right? The prophet will give another explanation. The one who channels archangels will give another explanation. See, that's the problem with the why question. It's not so much that it doesn't have an answer, it has an infinity of answers, depending only on the limits of our imagination. So, in actuality, why do dreams seem so real? Actually, all we can say, well, they do. And for our purposes, that makes quite a nice analogy for what we're talking about. That's all just an analogy. It's a pretty good analogy. I mean, after all, in a way, the one core difference between this waking dream, because that's, in a way, also what we're talking about. Yeah. Okay, let's come back to that in a minute then. But this waking dream, which is what we're talking about, it seems utterly real until the moment that it doesn't. And from the moment that it doesn't, we might as well use the phrase a waking dream. We could use other phrases if we like, but that's as good as any. Really, the one main characteristic that this has that the nighttime dream doesn't is consistency. Really, that's it. When we're in a nighttime dream, it's just as real as this. Usually, doesn't have to be, but usually. What's the difference? This is more consistent. And as I say, my usual way of putting this is that every night we go to sleep into a different dream, but every morning we wake up into the same dream. Why this dream is so much more difficult to see through. But actually, the nighttime dream is also extremely difficult to see through while we're in it. While the nighttime dream is apparently going on, it's very difficult to see through. But did I misunderstand your question?
No.
It might be good, it might be bad. It might be positive, it might be negative. But in either case, it's difficult to see through until it's in. One of the expectations that the mind sets up, and of course again this is perfectly natural that we should do this, perfectly understandable that we should do this, is that somehow there can be a kind of awakening after which the dream is only good. It's out of that idea that all the really attractive, seductive stories of personal enlightenment arise. There's this blessed state where there can be only peace and love and happiness and joy, and there's a huge industry based on that idea, in case you haven't noticed. A huge, vast industry. I'm sure somewhere there's a company in California rivaling Microsoft, which is actually churning out all of the books and the teachers and the DVDs and so forth to cash in on this perfectly understandable desire that we have, that there should be this impossible state where only good things are experienced. People will turn themselves inside out. People torture themselves. It's extraordinary the tortures that people will put themselves through. In the service of this illusory idea that life can become entirely and only positive.
That's me.
That's you. You've done that, but you still do. Right. What's the way you do? You don't have to answer that question. Particularly when you
I repeat the story over and over again. And so 3 years ago, I had a separation of divorce, and since then I've been through a story that's become more and more and more, pieces of very fast, and it's become so ridiculous. The story that it can be it's repeating itself so quickly, very dramatic, very, very dramatic circumstances. But it's making the illusion is almost like the dream almost like absurd, like caricature. So it's revealing itself to be, I think in a sense it's revealing itself to be, to me, as being fake. It's shaking, I think it's shaking as a result of that. It doesn't bring me any closer to, I can't see it bring me any closer to.
No, because nothing will.
Because nothing will.
Because nothing will. Because we will never get closer to this. We already are. Yeah. We will never get closer to this. This will be, if you like, seen clearly, let's just use that very neutral expression, when we're no longer there looking at it or looking for it. It's something else.
So I'm only saying to expose the illusion of becoming illusions. When nothing happens out like that, sure.
Yeah.
Things I've been throughout my life. The story of the book is sort of be very subtle, and now very big and clunky and more tangible. That's what I was referring to. I went to do the story.
No, we don't do that here.
Too shy to do that.
It's all right. There are places where that is done, but we don't tend to do that here.
I don't know whether it's just an idea that the daydream is more consistent because we have time to adjust the story. We are awake to adjust the story. I'm just being fantasizing here.
I mean, the fact is, it is more consistent.
Unless
you are highly psychotic.
Yeah.
Unless you're so highly psychotic, you're very unlikely to be sitting in this room right now. Then every morning we wake up into the same dream.
Yeah, but also I think when we wake up, kind of like we remind ourselves of the story in this funny sense. So maybe we do some adjustment to make it sound similar.
Do you mean when we wake up in the morning we remind ourselves of ours?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So maybe we actually tend to make it more consistent because we can link it up to.
Absolutely.
That's what I just sort of thought.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not that much more consistent, but because we are awake and we can adjust it and we can kind of link it.
Perhaps we should say that it seems much more consistent because, again, one of the very clever things, I don't know whether to say the mind does, and then add the mind that doesn't exist, or to say the brain does, or the psyche does, it doesn't matter. One of the things, of course, we do is that we weave an incredibly consistent story, which has very little to do with reality.
Yeah.
A very consistent story about the past and the present and the future and the trajectory. It doesn't take very much psychological investigation for that all to fall apart.
I sometimes think that maybe somebody with this, same experiences that I had, or whatever, would concoct a completely different story.
Well, they would.
Yeah, it would be kind of not you wouldn't recognise it as this is.
I mean, the phrase I've used before about this and that is that we're meaning seeking, we're like meaning seeking missiles, and we're constantly constructing meaning, we're constantly looking for patterns and constructing meaning. It's, there's probably a very good evolutionary survival basis to that. If there were ever any human beings who were lousy at constructing meaning out of patterns, they probably got eaten before they were fired by saber-toothed tigers. But it's one of the cores of our psyche is that we construct stories of meaning, and we tell a story about the past leading to the present, which is meaningful. And we can construct all sorts of different ones. I mean, for example, if somebody decides to spend 3 years with a psychotherapist, for example, and they choose, let's say, a traditional psychoanalyst over there, or they choose, let's say, a transpersonal psychoanalyst, so then after 3 years they'll probably come out with an entirely different story, both about their past, what happened, the meaning of it, and what's going to happen in the future, and how to run the future healthily. And it's all, in a way, I mean, it's incredibly meaningful until it isn't. And all of that meaning can just collapse like that. If you spend 3 years doing shamanistic workshops, then every time you come out onto your doorstep and there's a pigeon feather on the doorstep, it will have a meaning for you. But what we're doing here, I hope, is we're not challenging any of those meanings. If it's cold, we need to turn the thermostat up over there, Jen. It's all controlled from the central. There you go. But we're not talking here about, comparing the meaningful nature of these different stories, and that maybe a shamanistic story is better than the psychoanalytical story, or perhaps a transpersonal story where I meet my spirit guides is better than either of them. We're not talking on that level at all. It's this fundamental thing of seeing that all of that is a story. All of it is a story. There's this, and then to this we add the story. But there's just this.
Well, what would happen to society if there were no stories?
Probably it would just go on in its own sweet way.
If we're all enough stories.
We think we are. We think we are. So we think, whatever it might be, we could choose anything. We think, well, I'm getting out of bed this morning and I feel that my life is worthwhile because I'm going to go and see my guru today and he's going to remove this block in my heart chakra because he's told me that I'm ready now, or whatever. We think, that's a story. It's very meaningful. It's very sweet in a way. It's absolutely lovely. The loss of it can be actually quite upsetting, if not devastating, the loss of these stories. So we think that we're run by these stories, but actually stuff is just happening. Nobody got up in the morning intending to go to their guru to have their heart chakra cleared of its final block because they'd finally gather together sufficient money to make the £2,000 payment for that service or whatever it might be. Nobody did that. It's just, maybe that might be how this configures itself. It would make no difference. Life will just go on.
Then people who were locked down in mental institutions, people in mental who are being locked down in section, they've got no stories really. And they're probably more genuine.
Well, maybe sometimes we get locked up because we have stories which refuse to conform too violently to everybody else's story. But we, generally speaking, we think we are living our life. And some of us, more than others, think we are living our life meaningfully according to something which we wouldn't call a story, because calling it a story begins to deprive it of its intensity. We might be living our life according to a belief, let's say, or a passion or something like that. That's what we feel. I am leading my life. I am leading my life as a good, devoted Catholic, or as a good, devoted eco-warrior, or a member of such and such a political party, or whatever, or I'm just trying to be a good father, whatever it might be. And at the core of that always is I am living my life in such and such a way. And that's what we're talking about seeing through. But there is no one there at the centre that is, if you like, personally creating that. This is simply what's happening. Now, having said that, when, if the whole existence of a central self is seen through suddenly, it can be a shattering experience, and this can be one of the reasons it's shattering, because those stories explode. So the one who thinks that they're getting up in the morning to save the planet because they're an eco-warrior, that story would probably explode. Most individuals survive. It can be a shock, it can be a tremendous shock to see that because there is no one here living life, therefore life doesn't have a meaning. Life doesn't have a meaning because it doesn't need a meaning. Life is sufficient to itself, if you like. And that can be a tremendous shock to see that. But by and large, most individuals, where that is seen, they survive that finally there might even be some relaxation in seeing that. It is literally mind-blowing, because we're talking about seeing that there is no such thing as a mind. And you can come back to this when I started talking about the mind earlier. It is literally mind-blowing, and it's seen there is no such thing as a mind. Talking as if there was time, because we have to do that sometimes, we could say that this is a process.
Could you kind of compare that to somebody whose whole life is singing? Whatever, everything's connected with singing.
You mean literally singing?
Yeah, I mean singing, like the whole kind of profession, everything.
Yeah.
And then the voice goes.
Yes.
And that's it. And suddenly there's what then? I mean, it must be like.
Well, what then?
Yeah, exactly. No, what I'm saying is I'm saying, could it be similar to from the mind, seeing from the mind?
Yes.
If suddenly you see there isn't anything, it's completely out of anything. It's anything you believed in, it's gone. I don't know.
Yeah. It's not similar.
Yeah, no, I know it's not similar.
That's the
I know it's not similar.
Everything that is experienced by a person has nothing to do with, I don't know why it seems to be a bit of a theme of the afternoon, sticking with this idea of just a split second of seeing that there is no. Everything that is experienced by the person has nothing to do with that which is seen when it's seen that there is no person.
Now I can sort of sense that the two of them are not.
Could be a metaphor.
But
yes,
I can see that there's a difference between those two, but as a metaphor.
The interesting thing about the singer, for example, whose voice goes, is that it's possible to construct many different stories about that, and people do.
Yeah.
For example, you meet people who exactly that kind of thing has happened, and it's an absolute catastrophe, it's a disaster, it's terrible, and a year later in the story of time, they're saying that's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
Because it
no, I just really
into
meant it as a sudden metaphor to I know it's not the same. There's a sense that I know that it's not the same.
I mean, in a way, all we can do is search for metaphors, and that's, I use metaphors a lot, and they all fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I can't understand, Richard, is continuity, because history and geography all show a sign of continuity, and what I'm hearing you say is everything's just arising freshly.
Yes, absolutely.
And yet, to my observation, there seems to be continuity.
Of course.
History, tradition, and I can't quite, my mind can't, or the mind sense of the two juxtapositions.
And always will be, just like everybody else's mind, pretending that there are people with minds. The mind will always be lost in this. The mind cannot get this because the mind lives in time and continuity and cause and effect. And yet, the actual evidence, if you like, the direct evidence, see, when I say there's just this, not even a moment. The moment has duration, the moment has a beginning and a middle and end. There's just this, if you like, the only thing we can really say to it is it's outside time. Time doesn't apply. The actual direct experience, it sounds like maybe some philosophical statement, perhaps a philosophical statement of some stupidity, or a very bizarre philosophical statement, there's just this. But if we ignore the idea that it's some kind of idea on a philosophical level, and just accept it's simply a statement, it's just a description, actually, I'm a bit loath to use the word experience, but I can't think of a different one, so I will use it here. That is actually the experience, isn't it? What is experienced other than this? Hands up, those of us who can offer an answer to that question. What is experience other than this? Thoughts arise where? In this. Perceptions, sensations, feelings, taste. And underwater beauty arises in what? In this. A second ago? In the past? No. 5 seconds into the future that doesn't exist? No. Everything is. Direct experience tells us that everything only exists in this. But then the mind comes in and turns it. It has to. It's not like there's something wrong with us if that happens. The mind has to come in. That's how, if you like, we're constructed. The mind comes in and says that there's time and there's cause and effect and there's history and there's maybe evolution and progress, or maybe not, depending on the nature of the mind that's considered, and all the things you're talking about. Of course the mind cannot get this. And in an argument, I always say that in an argument between the mind and non-duality, the mind will always win. There's no point having an argument with the mind about this, the mind will win.